In the rolling hills of Missouri, 1883, the small town of Hawthorne's Hollow was known for its misty mornings, dense forests, and a lingering scent of smoked meat. At the edge of town, the Hawthorne family ran the butcher shop, a place both revered and feared. Elias Hawthorne, Clara's father, was a tall, imposing man with a voice like gravel, known for his precision with knives and his unwavering discipline. Clara, his only daughter, had grown up in the shadows of meat hooks and wooden counters, her small hands learning to clean and chop, yet always returning to her true fascination: dolls. Unlike other girls her age, Clara did not run through fields or play with ribbons. Instead, she lingered behind the shop's swinging door, observing people as they entered: farmers with worn hands, travelers with weary eyes, mothers carrying their children. She noticed the way grief tugged at shoulders, how fear hid behind smiles, and how loneliness settled into the bones of the townspeople. At night, by candlelight, she transformed scraps of wood, cloth, and straw into small, delicate figures. Her dolls weren't ordinary. They seemed to capture something unseen, something quietly human, though she could not explain why. Clara's mother, Mary, often watched her in silence, unsure whether to scold or encourage her daughter's obsession. "One day," Mary whispered, "people might see the darkness in your dolls and not understand." But Clara only smiled faintly, her pale blue eyes reflecting the flickering candlelight. She didn't just see shapes and fabrics. She saw lives, unspoken stories, and tiny sparks of sorrow she felt compelled to honor. The Missouri hills, with all its beauty and shadow, would soon witness something unusual, something that would quietly transform the hearts of the people who walked past Elias Hawthorne's butcher shop. Clara had always been drawn to people, not in the way that children are curious about faces, but in a deeper, almost sacred way. She observed their habits, their gestures, and even the silent pauses between words. Every customer entering her father's shop was a story waiting to be understood. She noticed the farmer with a limp, the widow clutching her coin purse too tightly, the boy who avoided eye contact while his mother negotiated prices. Each detail was etched in Clara's mind, a puzzle she silently tried to solve. Elias, her father, rarely spoke to her beyond the necessities of running the shop. "Stand straight," he would bark. "Watch the meat, not the people." But Clara could not help it. People fascinated her, how they carried joy, sorrow, fear, and hope in small, nearly invisible ways. She began sketching them in small notebooks, carefully noting the tilt of a head, the tension in hands, or the way eyes darted when someone lied or hid sadness. She didn't see them to judge, but to understand, to somehow capture what words failed to express. At night, her sketches became dolls. Each doll was a quiet reflection of the person it represented, their essence captured in the soft fabrics, the wooden limbs, and the carefully painted eyes. She worked meticulously, often forgetting to eat or sleep, driven by an unexplainable force to honor lives others barely noticed. The townspeople, busy with their daily struggles, had no idea that their hidden vulnerabilities were being transformed by a small, quiet girl in the back of a butcher shop. It was a bitter November morning when Thomas Weaver entered the shop. Clara noticed him immediately: thin, gaunt, and moving as if the weight of the world pressed down on him. His eyes, pale and hollow, darted around nervously as he approached the counter. Elias, never one for pleasantries, weighed a chunk of beef and handed it over without a word. But Clara watched. She felt a tug in her chest, an almost magnetic pull that drew her attention to his silent suffering. That night, Clara worked feverishly. She dug through scraps of fabric, careful not to let the wood splinters tear her fingers, and carved a doll. The doll wasn't grotesque, Nor was it whimsical. It mirrored Thomas in a way that captured the quiet despair etched into his face. She painted tiny, sorrowful eyes, stitched delicate hands that seemed to tremble, and placed the doll on her windowsill, illuminated by candlelight. The next morning, Thomas paused outside the shop. His pale eyes widened, fixed on the small figure in the window. His lips moved, but no words came. Clara, peering from behind the curtain, felt a strange mix of fear and curiosity. She did not know how or why, but the doll seemed to have touched something deep within him. The realization struck her. Perhaps her dolls could do more than mimic. They could recognize, acknowledge, and soothe unspoken pain. Thomas lingered near the shop, as if drawn by an invisible thread. He returned the next day, hesitant, and lingered by Clara's window again. He dared to speak. Did you make that for me?" he asked softly, his voice cracking. Clara nodded, unsure how to explain what had compelled her. I make them for people," she said simply. He stared at the doll, then at Clara, tears forming. "No one has ever seen me like this," he whispered. Clara didn't fully understand what he meant, but she felt a warmth spread through her chest, a confirmation that what she was doing mattered. She wasn't simply crafting dolls, she was offering recognition, a quiet acknowledgement that someone's struggles were real and visible. Word of the strange, lifelike dolls began to spread slowly, though discreetly. The townspeople began to notice dolls in unexpected places, windowsills, benches, even leaning against trees. Each doll seemed to mirror a person in uncanny detail. Murmurs of curiosity mixed with unease. Some wondered if Clara was eccentric. Others feared something darker. Yet quietly, the dolls brought a strange sense of comfort. Whispers began to circulate. The butcher's daughter made dolls that looked like the townspeople. Mothers whispered to daughters, husbands to wives, but few dared confront Clara directly. They noticed subtle changes. Burdens seemed lighter, tensions eased, glances softened. Elias grew uneasy. Business thrived, yet his daughter's creations unnerved him. He called her to the back room one evening. "Clara," he said, voice low and stern, "people are talking. These dolls. What are you doing?" Clara met his gaze, steady and calm. "I see them, Father. I see them, and I try to give them something they can't say for themselves." Elias's frown deepened. "You're meddling with things you don't understand." Clara only shook her head, yet even Elias could not deny the subtle changes. People lingered longer in the shop, leaving with lighter hearts. Children ran home giggling after spotting their dolls. Elderly neighbors smiled softly, touched by a recognition they could not articulate. Slowly, a quiet transformation was underway in Hawthorne's Hollow, one crafted by a girl who saw the hidden pieces of people's hearts. Mary Hawthorne, Clara's mother, had long watched her daughter work. She was torn between fear and pride. One evening she confronted Clara in the small kitchen, lantern light flickering against the walls. "Clara," she said gently, "why do you waste your days on these dolls? People might fear them, think them unnatural." Clara paused, stitching tiny hands, eyes downcast. "They're not for fear, Mother. They carry pieces of people, their sadness, their loneliness. Maybe someone needs to be seen even if no one else notices." Mary's hands trembled slightly as she stirred the stew. She didn't reply, but her heart softened. Perhaps Clara's dolls were more than oddities. Perhaps they were small bridges between unseen hearts, a way to acknowledge the weight of silent struggles. Clara's work grew more precise. Every gesture, every small detail was captured in sketches first, then translated into delicate dolls. She began leaving them intentionally where she knew the people would see them. A doll on a widow's windowsill made her sigh softly, A figure on the butcher's bench brought a farmer to reflection, and a child giggled at the tiny version of himself sitting among the larger dolls. The dolls weren't merely representations, they were mirrors of hidden emotions. Clara often stayed awake until the small hours, carving, stitching, and painting each one with meticulous care. The dolls reflected sorrow, yes, but also hope, courage, and empathy. Slowly, the town began to change. Neighbors offered assistance more freely. Strangers exchanged smiles, and laughter, once rare, became more common. The dolls, small as they were, began to weave a web of quiet understanding through Hawthorne's Hollow. One cold morning, a traveling preacher arrived in town. Skeptical of rumors, he entered the shop, curious to see Clara's work. She presented him with a doll, modest in size, yet radiant with subtle warmth. He took it in trembling hands, staring deeply into the painted eyes. How, how did you know? He whispered, tears threatening to spill. Clara only shrugged, her voice quiet. I watch. The preacher, hardened by years of witnessing human suffering, felt something he hadn't felt in decades, a recognition of his hidden burdens, mirrored in something small, delicate, yet profoundly truthful. That evening, he spoke of the girl who saw beyond appearances, the one whose quiet art reminded him of the power of empathy and understanding. Clara realized, perhaps for the first time, that her dolls did more than mimic. They acknowledged, comforted, and inspired. In the months that followed, more dolls appeared. People began to request them quietly, afraid of gossip, but longing for acknowledgement. Each doll, unique and precise, reflected its recipient with uncanny accuracy. Husbands and wives, neighbors and strangers, all felt the subtle comfort of being seen, of being understood. Clara's dolls transformed Hawthorne's Hollow from a town of quiet suspicion to a place where empathy thrived. Even Elias could not deny the change. Customers lingered longer, conversation softened, and small acts of kindness began to ripple through the community. What had started as a private fascination had become a quiet, invisible revolution of the heart. Elias, finally unable to contain his unease, confronted Clara one stormy evening. "Clara," he said, voice trembling with frustration, "these dolls, they're not normal. People whisper, they fear them." Clara met his gaze calmly. "Father, they are not meant to frighten. They are kindness made tangible. They show people that someone truly sees them, even the parts they hide from the world." Elias, gruff and unyielding, paused. For the first time he considered her words. He noticed the change in his customers, the softened faces, the lighter steps. Perhaps his daughter's dolls were not strange. Perhaps they were necessary. Though he didn't admit it aloud, something shifted in his heart that night, and Clara smiled, understanding that her quiet work had begun to transform even the hardest of hearts. Winter had just begun, and the air carried a bitter chill when a tragedy shook Hawthorne's Hollow. The Weaver household, a modest home near the edge of town, caught fire late one night. Flames roared through the wooden beams, smoke billowing into the sky. Thomas Weaver, Clara's silent friend, was frantic. His wife and young child were trapped inside, and the townspeople rushed toward the chaos. Clara, sensing the danger from her window, worked quickly. She grabbed scraps of cloth and wood, fashioning dolls that reflected courage, resilience, and protection. She placed them around the town square, near homes and along the streets, silently hoping their presence would inspire action. The townspeople, noticing these delicate figures, felt a subtle shift in courage, an unspoken urging to help, to act, to save. Neighbors broke into the Weaver home just in time, dragging Thomas's wife and child from the flames. No one could explain it, but Clara's dolls seemed to infuse them with courage, turning fear into decisive action. Thomas stood trembling, clutching his saved family, his eyes meeting Clara's briefly. For a moment, words were unnecessary. The dolls had done more than mimic. They had inspired life itself. That night, Hawthorne's Hollow felt the weight of mortality and the power of empathy. Clara realized her creations were no longer just personal reflections, they could affect entire communities. Her hands, small yet precise, had woven threads of courage through the hearts of strangers. And in the flickering candlelight of her room, she wondered how far this quiet magic might reach. In the weeks following the fire, the town's attitude toward Clara shifted. Once whispered rumors of witchcraft or eccentricity faded into quiet admiration. People began approaching her gently, requesting dolls for their loved ones. Each request was met with Clara's meticulous care. She listened, sketched, stitched, and painted, creating not just dolls, but vessels of empathy. Elias, her father, observed silently. He noticed children laughing freely as they played with their dolls, neighbors speaking with newfound kindness, and strangers offering help without hesitation. Slowly, he began to understand. His daughter's work was more than a hobby. It was a subtle, transformative force. One evening, he entered Clara's workshop and watched her work, her hands moving gracefully, her eyes reflecting care and precision. You're changing people," he murmured, almost to himself. Clara smiled faintly. "I only see them, Father. They already have the capacity for kindness. It just needs to be acknowledged." Elias nodded slowly, a rare moment of humility washing over him. The town itself had become a living testament to Clara's quiet power. In the Missouri hills, the butcher's daughter had begun turning fear into empathy, suspicion into understanding, and silence into connection. Years of observing her father's stern demeanor had left Clara with a deep, unspoken longing. Elias rarely showed affection, and moments of warmth were fleeting. One snowy evening, Clara decided to craft a doll unlike any she had made before, a doll for her father. She infused it with patience, love, and a subtle reminder of his humanity. Every stitch carried her longing for connection. Every painted eye reflected the warmth she wished he could feel. The next morning, she placed the doll carefully on the butcher counter. Elias found it while sharpening his knives. He examined it closely, noting the detail in its expression, the subtle tilt of its head, and the warmth emanating from its tiny presence. Something stirred within him. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, he reached out and touched it, then turned toward Clara. For the first time in years, he embraced his daughter, silently acknowledging her devotion, her insight, and her quiet strength. That embrace broke the walls of solitude that had defined their relationship for so long. Clara felt a joy she had never known. Her art had not only reached the town but had touched the heart of the man she loved most. Word of Clara's dolls spread far beyond Hawthorne's Hollow. Travelers from neighboring towns and, eventually, distant cities came to witness the delicate figures and their strange emotional resonance. Some came out of curiosity, some out of disbelief, but most left humbled, touched by the subtle magic woven into each creation. Clara welcomed visitors with quiet grace, showing them her dolls and explaining their purpose. She encouraged others, particularly children, to try crafting their own, emphasizing empathy and observation rather than technical skill. The town slowly transformed into a hub of creativity, kindness, and understanding. Even the most skeptical visitors left with softened hearts, carrying dolls as reminders of the quiet power of seeing and acknowledging others. The transformation of Hawthorne's Hollow became more than folklore. It became a movement. Clara's dolls, small and unassuming, had sparked a culture of care, compassion, and reflection. Visitors returned home inspired, teaching their own communities to observe, understand, and honor human emotion in ways that words alone could not. One day, a wealthy merchant from St. Louis arrived, scoffing at tales of the butcher's daughter and her dolls. He wandered through the shop, eyeing the creations with condescension, and laughed openly. Clara, unshaken, offered him a doll. He reluctantly accepted it. As he held it, he was struck by its uncanny resemblance to his own concealed fears and worries. The doll mirrored not wealth or status, but the merchant's loneliness, insecurity, and longing for meaning. Tears welled in his eyes, and he whispered, I haven't felt seen like this in decades." The merchant left humbled, carrying the doll as a reminder that human connection outweighed material wealth. Clara realized that her art could reach even those hardened by privilege or success. The dolls were not simply reflections, they were awakenings, silent teachers showing people the truths they avoided, the emotions they denied. As her reputation grew, Clara began keeping a journal, documenting each doll, its recipient, and the subtle effects she observed. She wrote about people's sorrows alleviated, courage inspired, and quiet moments of reflection prompted by her creations. Each page became a testament to empathy in action. Through her journal, Clara reflected on the profound responsibility of seeing others' hidden emotions. She understood that art, even in its smallest forms, could heal, inspire, and transform. The dolls became more than toys. They were living chronicles of humanity's unspoken depths, carefully preserved by a young girl who believed in the power of quiet observation. One spring, a little girl approached Clara, clutching a crudely made doll. She wanted to learn, to emulate, to contribute. Clara knelt beside her, guiding her hands, encouraging precision but emphasizing love, empathy, and patience. The girl's mother, watching from a distance, felt tears in her eyes. She realized that Clara's legacy was no longer confined to her dolls. It was living, spreading to the next generation. Children who learned from Clara grew up understanding the power of observation, empathy, and quiet acts of kindness. The town had become a place where hearts were nurtured as much as minds, and where the legacy of a quiet, observant girl would continue through countless hands. Clara's final masterpiece was a miniature village, each figure representing a family, neighbor, or stranger. She placed it in the town square, a delicate, silent homage to the lives she had touched. People gathered, marveling at the intricate details and subtle truths embedded in each tiny figure. The doll village was more than art. It was a mirror of Hawthorne's Hollow itself, a living testament to the power of empathy, reflection, and shared humanity. Children, adults, and elders alike felt their hearts stir, realizing that each life mattered, each story was worth seeing, and that kindness could manifest in the smallest of forms. Years later, Clara passed quietly in her sleep. The town mourned deeply, yet her dolls remained, preserved in homes, shops, and schools. Children who had learned from her continued her work, crafting dolls to honor unseen struggles and foster empathy. Hawthorne's Hollow became a place where small gestures carried weight, where quiet observation led to meaningful connection, and where a single girl's vision of compassion had transformed an entire community. Clara's legacy endured, showing that even in darkness, acts of love and understanding could shine brightly, guiding generations toward empathy and care. The butcher's daughter, who had once watched silently behind her father's shop, had changed the world in her own quiet way. Her dolls became symbols of reflection, empathy, and love. People whispered her name with reverence, recalling how one girl's small hands had shown the profound power of seeing, acknowledging, and honoring others. Clara Hawthorne had not merely crafted dolls, she had crafted hearts. Through her delicate creations, she taught the town and the world that to truly see another human being is one of the most profound acts of kindness. In Hawthorne's Hollow, her story continued to inspire, a timeless reminder that empathy, patience, and understanding can ripple through generations, transforming lives in ways no one could predict.